Thanks for tapping in, guys. Today is just going to be an open line Q&A. So I'm here to answer any questions that you guys have about real estate. Definitely stick around. There are always some good questions that get asked. So even if you don't have a question, which if you have one, drop it in the chat. If you don't have the question, just stick around. You're going to hear some good stuff from some other people's questions and the answers. I try to dive a mile deep. So once again, open line, drop the question in the chat and let's go ahead and kick this thing off. So the first question that we got is now a good time to buy real estate? This is a I think it's a good question. And the answer is it depends on where you're at, right? So even though if you look at how real estate is marketed on the news, real estate is typically marketed on a mass level. So they're going for like the news is going for clicks. CNN, NBC, like CNBC, whatever news media you watch, they're going for clicks. So they're typically going to talk to the majority of people. The majority of people would be like the mom and pop buyers. They represent 40 anywhere from I would say 70 actually to 80% of the market is people who are looking for their first home. They're going to move into the house. They're not investors. Only about 20% of the market is investor based, and even out of that 20% of the market, most of that is going to be iBuyer based. So a lot of the big money like Zillow, Redfin, Remax, some of these companies will have different divisions that are iBuyer based. So they have like hedge fund partners where they're dumping 500, 600 $1 million every 6 to 12 months into the market. They're just buying everything. So the marketing is for that 80%. And when they market to that 80%, they just talk in broad generalities like, yeah, now's not a good time to buy because prices are going up. They'll mention a few markets. But the reality is, pricing is very local. So when we look into real estate, the prices are super local, to the level of, you really do as an investor need to break this thing down to where in particular are you located? Are you located in the Northeast? If you're in the Northeast, a lot of the things that are going on with the market that are the result of the COVID shutdown, they haven't quite hit the Northeast yet because demand is very high in the Northeast. People are actually moving back from the Midwest. What happened with COVID is a lot of the shutdowns resulted in people being able to work from home. And because people were working from home and everything was shut down in the city wasn't that attractive of a place to live in. So now you had people leaving the city and going, out to the Midwest. I'm going to go out to Carolina. I'm going to go out to Colorado. I'm going to work from there. Or maybe go down to like Florida. I'm going to work from the beach. And that was all cool. But now that I don't even know that COVID numbers are more under control, but COVID is kind of, I guess people are over it to a degree, especially in the workforce. They're calling people back to work. A lot of people are migrating back to the city. So in the Midwest, you do have more properties hitting the market. So we have more people coming to the market with their deals. They're not selling as much. Inventory is piling up because rates are going, up. So that is lowering buyer demand and leading to an increase in, just properties just sitting on the market, right? So we are dealing with some of that. But they also have a drop in demand from people just moving out and not as many people moving into these areas as were initially projected because those projections were based on what they were seeing from the COVID migrations. So now that they're getting reverse migration, a lot of the Sun Belt, a lot of the Midwest, a lot of the West Coast, or even places like South Florida, they're seeing the biggest price declines out there. So that market is a little bit choppy in terms of, is now a good time to buy or your property value is going to go down. The Northeast, people are moving back. So even though there's more demand coming on the market, the prices are still relatively stable, which it kind of shocked me to a degree because you don't know what you're going to get in these types of markets, but we're still seeing stable markets in the Northeast. So it's still a market in most of the Northeast that would be like Baltimore, Philly, DC, Delaware, Jersey, parts of New York, Boston, a lot of this northeast coast is still pretty stable, so you could even buy and flip still in these markets. The comps are good. Prices aren't pulling back as much as they are in some of these other markets. So the long story short is it depends on where you are regarding if it's a good time to buy. You certainly don't want to buy at the top of the market and then have the market like collapse on you in terms of value. If you're out in the Midwest, South Florida, the Sun Belt, the West Coast, it might not be a great time to buy, even as just a mom and pop, person who's going to live in the house. But as an investor, it might not be a great time to buy into those particular markets. You may want to look at investing out of town as an option to build up, more of a nest egg and buy into a market where prices could even go up, a bit higher. So whenever I'm thinking about this, I want to get super local and focus on this on a micro level, not a macro level, because everything you see on the news, once again, 90% of it is macro because they're trying to reach the masses for clickbait. They don't really care if you as an investor are going to make any money or not on a buy and hold deal. They're looking at, what are people going to click on, and fear, sells the news. So just tell everybody it's a bad market. Don't buy anything. Now with rates, rates are going up. That eats into your cash flow. It could be substantial depending on the size of the deal and what other factors are going up. I mean, sometimes people focus on rates like a ton, but another thing to focus on are property taxes. Are property taxes increasing exponentially in your area? Because that can eat into your cash flow as bad or worse than interest rates. So there are a lot of different factors to look at. But what I'm thinking about with rates, which kind of brings me to another angle to view it from, is rates are going up. Yes, we are seeing that. We know that this is going to be potentially happening for the next year, like 6 to 12 months. And then rates are actually, if you go out far enough, they're projected to start coming back down. So I don't know that this is just going to be like rates are going straight up in a straight line type of a thing. Rates will come back down. And then, if you got a good deal, you could then refinance into lower rates like a little bit later, having already locked up a good deal. So that could put you, in a really solid position. But as rates go up, now we have to pivot and say, what's the bank going to do? And people aren't really thinking at that level because they haven't been on some of the phone calls that people like me have been on. Like I've been on phone calls with banks where they're just like, look, the capital markets shut down. We're not issuing any loans. Like we're dead. And when I had those calls, like it was very horrifying to like an investor, right? Because if the bank's not issuing refinances and you're in the BRRRR strategy, one of those R's in the BRRRR stands for refi, right? So you're kind of dead in the water. But the lenders, they're sharks, right? They have to keep swimming. They have to keep issuing loans because if they don't keep issuing loans, they eventually drown. They eventually just fail out of the business. Like they can't keep the lights on. They can't keep their mortgage for their big office paid. So they have to keep writing these mortgages. And as demand falls because rates are going up, they have to adjust. And one of those adjustments is going to be extending mortgage rates. So they're going to be pushing out, not rates, but they're going to be pushing out the term of these mortgages. So a 30-year fixed is going to turn into a 40-year fixed sooner than you believe. There are already parts of the world where they're looking at 50-year fixed mortgages. And they're doing this because the bank is not going to just sit there and not issue loans. They're going to adjust. So if the Fed keeps bumping up rates, then the banks are going to sit there and say, how can we tap into demand? From a supply demand perspective, you have to lower pricing somehow to match demand. So if they extend the mortgage term, then the monthly payment is going to go down, which means more people can afford higher prices and even higher rates. So people will continue to buy at that point into these higher mortgage rates. So, that's going to happen. So I think it's kind of this is a time to really tap into knowledge, to hone in on what you want to do as an investor Like, what is your 2 year plan? If your 2 year plan is to go out and get 2 properties the first year and then 4 properties the next year, hone in on that, tap in on that, really focus in on what knowledge you need, what systems you need, what teams you need. Do you need to learn how to full gut renovate? Do you need to learn how to manage construction crews? And take some of this downtime to tap in and focus on that, because the market will reveal itself. And when the market reveals itself, that's when you want to go in and buy. But you can't sit on the sidelines and not have the knowledge, because when the market reveals itself, all of the sharks, all the investors are going to jump in and take advantage of whatever opportunity presents itself, which could be, for me, it's like a 40-year note. It's like, all right, that's what it is. Let's lock them up before they take it away. Because some of these things, it's like the KFC menu. Like, they put on it something good, and then it's like, it's out. They take it away. They'll take away some of these mortgage products from you. So some things that are really good in this market, then rates go down a little bit, and the banks don't need to issue that type of product, or like a no money down mortgage, or something where they're rolling closing costs into the loan. Some people look at these products and say, oh, this is predatory. This is subprime. Well, subprime is dependent upon who is accessing that product. So to a degree, if somebody's unsophisticated and they're being issued a product that's going to have a higher failure rate, that can be very problematic. But not for an investor who's highly sophisticated and has access to this knowledge and can make a good profit spread off of that deal. It's not problematic for you if you're going to put tenants in place and have them pay for the mortgage and pay off the mortgage, whether it's 30 or 40 years or 35 years or whatever it is. So you just need to tap into the knowledge, stay plugged in, and start to build your plan and be ready, because my belief is that we're going to see some of the best opportunities that we've seen within the next 12 to 16 months, maybe sooner. So you have to stay super tapped in right now and really hone your craft. Now's the time to build your knowledge up to the expert level. If you don't know how to run comps and think like an appraiser, like to really understand value to that level, how an appraiser would walk in and look at your property, you need to hone that. You need to hone that, because you can't be trying to figure that out when the market opens up and the opportunities open up. That's not the time to figure it out. That's the time to take advantage. So we'll see. I think it's always a good time to buy properties for the most part. They say don't wait to buy real estate, buy the real estate and wait is the best way to go about it. So it's usually always a good time to be buying. The question is, where should you buy? What type of product should you buy? You definitely don't want to be buying like the A-class rental property at the top of the market, because those people are going to lose their jobs first in a deep recession, which we could go into. You want to be in affordable housing right now. You want to be buying in neighborhoods where affordable housing products are easily able to be created, and that demand during a recession, it's a durable product. Durable products tend to increase in value during times of recession. A-class, the center city property, that's not really durable when those people are going to lose their jobs first. The guy who's driving Uber, the guy's working at Walmart is not going to lose his job in a recession. Not as easily as the person who's kind of overpaid or in some executive position at a company that's not going to survive. So let's see what other questions are out there. Anybody can hop in the chat or hop off of mute. Anybody can ask anything. But that's a good question. So definitely keep your eye on the ball. Always watch the market, whether you're buying or not. You always want to be watching this market. That's the only way you're going to see the different market fluctuations. Yeah, and Rod just mentioned in the course, we teach you how to. Rod just joined the mentorship course a few weeks ago, and we teach you how to think like an appraiser. It'll be very eye opening for a lot of us who have thought about like running comps, and everybody kind of knows generally when you're running comps, you want to go like to like. You want to find a property that's kind of like your property. And if you have a 3-bed 1-bath, you want to look for something 3 beds 1 bath to comp it against, and that's like the general stuff. But when you get beyond that surface level, into the sandbox is what I would call it, of what an appraiser has to do to create a value for your property or to, earmark it. You once you learn how to think at that level, you can outthink the appraiser. You can start to um, play game. I won't say play games because that almost has like a negative connotation. But you can play the game with the appraiser. You can go into different markets or pull comps from gentrified areas of the city into maybe the C class, a half a mile away, and create massive value. You only need to tap into one stream to go out and make $250,000 or $500,000 like in a year. If you pull it off like one time, 5, 10 deals one time, you're gonna knock down that and have like a $2 million, portfolio and a bunch of cash flow. That's they say there's a and I'll get into this question. They say there's a quote from I think it was like the CEO of Nike. You only have to be right the last time. You don't have to be right the first time, the next time. You only have to be right the last time. So this is one of those things that once you get it right, it's the last time. And that's the only time you need to be right. Is getting that valuation right, pulling the comps, running into the right appraiser, having the lending relationships in place, and just going out and executing. And, then you'll have a problem, which I think is a funny problem, which is I need more deals, which is, it's a funny problem to have. Here's a question. Do you recommend wholesaling? Which is a good question. Um, let's kind of break it up into some components. One, what is wholesaling, and do I like pure wholesaling? So there's pure wholesaling, and then there's creative financing, seller financing, turning the seller into the bank. Pure wholesaling is where you go to somebody and they're in some form of distress or they inherited a property, and you pretty much try to get this property under contract at some low ball price, like, hey, this deal's worth 175. I'm gonna try to get it under contract for 50K. And it happens all the time. Maybe it's in rougher shape. Maybe the seller's unsophisticated, or there's just some motivation there. So you put it under contract at a low price, then you mark it up a little bit, 5, 10 grand, and you sell it to a developer, somebody like me who's going to buy it, bring in a construction crew and renovate it, put tenants in place, do that BRRRR strategy, refinance out of it, or somebody who's going to take it, renovate it, and flip it. And you can make money as a wholesaler. I paid hundreds of thousands of dollars of commissions to traditional wholesalers, people who just go out and flyer, skip trace, cold call, door knock, whatever it takes to get deals under contract. And they make a lot of money, right? They make good money. Not all of them make a ton of money, but you can make good money. And from a volume standpoint, I paid out good money to people who do this. Now, on the flip side of that, traditional wholesalers kind of miss the boat when they just stick with this pure wholesaling, because when they run into a person and they're like, hey, I'm gonna offer you 50K, and they're like, look, dude, I'm underwater on my mortgage. My mortgage is 150. The house is only worth 155. By the time I sell this through a realtor, I'm gonna lose money because I gotta pay the realtor commissions and the fees. What can you offer me? Can you offer me a real deal, or are you just here trying to rip me off and offer me next to nothing for my property? If you don't have the next level of game to say, well, if I could get you the price that you were looking for, would you give me the terms? Well, what does the terms mean? Well, let's talk about it. Can I do subject to financing? Can I do a lease purchase option? Can I do a land contract? Can I do some of these, a sandwich lease option and then take it and rent to own it? What can I do with this product? Can I come up with a win-win creative financing solution where, I win and the seller wins? Can I get them out of a bad deal? Can I save them from foreclosure? Or, do I have that talent? Do I know the contracts that are necessary to do that, how to fill them out? And can more than that, can I educate somebody in distress? Once you learn how to educate somebody who is in distress on the solutions that are available to them and how these creative financing solutions that they've never heard of could be the key to them actually getting out of a deal that they're underwater on, that's where you can actually make, serious money. doing things like that. So wholesaling can be a good way to start. It's actually an interesting starting block because most people's big problem, so they think at least, is I don't know how to get any good deals. I don't know where the good deals are. And the wholesalers, I mean, they have to know where the good deals are, right? Their entire business model is based upon getting good deals, deals that are so good that they can mark them up 5 or 10,000 and still sell them, and somebody can buy it at a markup and still make a profit. So that's a really good deal. That's a pennies on a dollar deal. So you're learning in some ways the hardest, what many people would consider to be the hardest part of the business. You would be learning first by becoming a wholesaler. Um, but I think most wholesalers stop short of the end game. And the real end game is learning creative financing, learning how to invest without tons of cash or really any credit at all. And a lot of people, I would say, I would say 70% of people who want to get into real estate think they can't because they don't have the credit to get qualified for loans. So they just stop and they're like, well, my credit's bad. So I'll figure this out once I fix my credit. And then they never end up fixing their credit. They never get a deal. If they learned about creative financing and put aside the full burst strategy and doing that whole thing, they would be much better off by just going out and kind of winning and executing from day one in that manner. So wholesaling is not that I recommend wholesaling. I don't not recommend it. I don't want people to fall short on just mastering pure wholesaling and not getting to the next level where you can actually control property without direct ownership in many ways, and that makes you like super investor. So my big focus is on making people into super investors. Like I want you to understand value. Most wholesalers, if I sit them down and say, what is this property worth? They barely know how to run comps and they have no idea what construction costs. Like no idea. Some of my, masterclass students will laugh if when I send them a budget on a deal and a wholesaler sends them a budget on the same deal. The wholesaler is like, oh, it costs 100K. I got 2 bids. It said 100K. And I'm like, it's going to cost 190. And they're just like, well, how's it going to cost 190, Brian? And then I break it down line by line. And it's like, see, it costs 190. I'm not just making a number up. They're making a number up. They didn't get a bid. They just figured we're going to buy it. They run weird calculations like the property's worth 250. So multiply that by 0.65, then subtract 10,000, and that's what you should charge. Or that's what you can put it under contract for. Then you mark it up to 10,000. And the developer can just build it, within that 35%. And it's like, no, that's not how real estate works. A deal costs to build what it costs to build, period. So, and every deal is different. So most wholesalers, how could you wholesale a deal if you don't know the cost of construction? If you don't know how much it costs to build a property, how can you wholesale a deal? How can you be a proper wholesaler? How can you even know what to offer on a deal if you don't know what it costs to build it? And you're looking at it and trying to evaluate it and make an offer. You don't even know the cost of construction. So I think most wholesalers just aren't trained properly. The training, the core of real estate, like if you wanted to invest in cars, I would want you to have the knowledge of a mechanic to a degree. Like you don't need to actually put cars back together with your hands, but you should know the knowledge generally of a mechanic, which is what materials are generally needed to put a car together, what those materials cost generally, what the turnaround times are on those materials if you order them generally, and the cost of the labor, the cost of the different people that will come in and take those materials once they're delivered to a site and put a car back together, how long that takes and how much money they get like per day or per hour. You would want to know that knowledge if you were going to be a master car investor, right? Or else how could you? So you should want to have the same knowledge to be a real estate investor. And it doesn't matter if you're a wholesaler, a burst strategist, a buy and flipper, in commercial or residential, none of these things matter. So when people come to me and they're like, Brian, what do I need to know? I want to, get into deals. We can do a house hack. We can do some deals and kind of build up some cash flow very quickly, right? These strategies are out there. And we can get into wholesaling or burst strategy or flipping or buying tax liens and tax certs, and you can do all of these things, but you still have to learn the game, which is valuation, construction, what's going on underneath the hood. You need to learn the game so that you can not get burned, and so that you'll be in a position to accelerate. So that's my full scope answer on, is wholesaling good? It depends. I think mastering the fundamentals of real estate valuation and construction are good. And then once you take that knowledge, you can do whatever you want with it. If you end up as a wholesaler, do it, but then also learn creative financing, learn the full spectrum of wholesaling, which creative financing is a form. It's a form of wholesaling, but at the same time, you don't have to sell those properties to anyone. If you get really good at creative financing, you can keep those deals for pennies on a dollar, and that puts you in a whole different arena. So that's the full scope to that. Any other questions out there? Anything at all? And feel free you can hop off mute, ask a question, drop it in the chat. Any questions at all, and we'll keep flowing through this thing. Yes. Okay. So the question is, just for everybody listening on other platforms, the question is, if I run into a deal and it looks good from a surface level, but it's occupied by squatters, how do I deal with that project? Do I just like pass on it? Do I, continue to evaluate it? What do I do? So I've come across some really good deals over the years that were occupied by squatters. Um, I will continue to evaluate the deal. Squatters squatters can be more aggressive at times with the original owner than the new owner. They kind of fear, like it's kind of like the devil you know versus the devil you don't. Like they kind of fear the new sheriff in town coming in, and like, what is this new person going to do? Are they going to be erratic? They've kind of already defeated the original owner into being like, I'm a squatter, I'm not going to pay, I'm not leaving, deal with me. They've defeated that person, but they haven't defeated you yet. So there are ways to kind of approach the table with the right attitude. And the right attitude is definitely in the form of, depending on where you're at, because there's some places, like if you're in California, you might be screwed, right? Like some of these cities are just, in my opinion, so they're just kind of backwards with how they deal with landlords. Like they just have no respect for landlords for whatever reason. They just think landlords are just made of money and they can do whatever they want. But depending on where you're at, you want to approach this with an eviction attorney. So before you close, what you want to do with these contracts is this. And I guess we're not quite getting into insider information, but we're getting into the weeds. What you want to do in terms of a plan of attack on a squatter, this is like my basic plan. Um, I want to approach with an eviction attorney. We're gonna offer cash for keys if possible. Like, hey, we're gonna get in touch with them. I'm gonna put this deal under a contract, maybe like a 60-day contract, close vacant. Give me 60 days, I'll deal with it, and we'll close vacant. So the seller's like, all right, cool, because you're gonna take care of their squatter issue, right? I'm lowballing the heck out of them. If they're asking for 50K, I'm offering them 25. Like, there's no point of negotiating heavy with a property with a squatter in it, and don't negotiate against yourself. Dion, you asked the question, like you just saw, we had a seller who's like, I'm not taking less than 103, and we're like 97, and you're like, Brian, what should we do? And I'm like, I didn't hear another bidder. We're not negotiating against ourselves. They're gonna take the money or they're gonna walk. You can't be afraid to walk, and they took it. So and that's a learning lesson. That's like a gut check. I do this kind of every day, but it's a good experience to go through, to stand your ground and get the price, but always lowball and stand your ground. Get the tenant's squatter's number. Send your eviction attorney, post a letter on the door, Hey, we want to talk. We're going to be the new owners. We had the deal under contract. Only do this after you're under contract. You're essentially now the equitable owner. You place the deposit. You intend to close. All these things. And we're going to try to negotiate with them. Hey, we want to help, and we are coming from the position of help. Like, people are going through different things at different times, so you want to be helpful. You're going to negotiate the price down to a point where you have capital to also deal with the squatter. So I don't want to pay top dollar either, because I might have to pay the squatter 3 grand to get out, and I'll do it. I'll pay them 3 grand to get out if I'm going to make 100 grand on the deal. You know what I mean? Like, if that's the position that they played, then they got a little ticket at the end, and great. They got a little lotto ticket. They got 3 grand, and that's how the eviction attorney is going to present it. Look, we can be friendly. You can get paid to kind of leave and get a little ticket at the end, and congratulations, you squatted. You got 3 grand, or you can play this the hard way, and either way, you're gonna leave. And that's the message that the original owner, because they're not sophisticated enough, they don't know how to just go out and get their paperwork together and file a legitimate eviction. You got to present that I'm not that person. I understand that you did this. Here's the reality. I'm going to get my paperwork together, and you're going to leave. So you can do it this way or that way. You can take the money, or we'll just deal with it in court, and you'll get out, and then we'll just build the property and move forward. We don't really care. But at least in this way, if we're giving you cash for keys, then at least, you're winning. You get a little bit of money. You can relocate. We'll help you to move your stuff out. Maybe we'll put it in storage for 30 days. And most of these storage garages will run um, 30-day like coupon like programs, essentially, where the first 30 days is free, and then it's like half off or something. Like, they're trying to fill up vacancy. So maybe we'll get a truck. We'll put your stuff in storage, but you come up with some agreement. Most people will leave. Most people will take the money, sign, cash your keys, hand over the keys. They move out. You change the locks, put up security cameras. Done. Most of them will leave. Some will not leave, but under contract, if they don't leave, you can always back out of the contract. If the deal is so good and you have like excess liquidity, then maybe you lock up the deal and you just go through a legitimate eviction process. And that would just be having the paperwork, go apply, get the rental licenses. If they don't want to let the city in, you post a 24-hour notice on their door. You show up, um, and you can call the like, you can do things like, this is my property. You have to just constantly remind them of that. Like, they're also with squatters' rights. What's interesting is, once a squatter leaves, so this is squatters' rights. As long as they stay in the property, they can squat. If they go out for a cup of coffee and you run in the door, if they're not physically there, they lose all squatters' rights, like right then and there, if they're not physically there. So you can come in and just, they went out, because these people, like, especially in the major cities, they're not in there all day. They come back and squat at night. In the morning, they're running around, going, they got to buy some drugs, they got to buy some liquor from the liquor store, they got to run their errands during midday. I'll sit somebody out in a car right outside their house all day. I'll pay a guy $150 a day, just sit there. They leave, run in, change the locks, board it up, and climb out the second floor window. Like, and we'll just take control of it. They come back the next day, we full gutted it. There's nothing to live in anymore. So there's different ways to play the game. Not that I'm recommending any of this stuff, but I think the cleanest way is if they just cash for keys, and that has been very successful. And I have like I said, I have no problem kind of sharing the wealth with people. Hey, we're gonna make some money off the deal. You made some money, great. You were a squatter, you got paid. Who cares? I'm trying to run my program. I've also had people leave out of, not that we like would do anything to anybody, but just sharing. Like, I've had my guys be like, they'll tell me after the fact, but they're like, look, this is how we eat. You got to go. Especially if it's not like, there are levels of squatters. Most of the squatters in the inner city are just like, maybe they got a drug problem or something. They just squat in vacant houses. They're not really like living there with their family and their kids and stuff. We're not really talking about that. They're usually just like lone wolves hanging out in properties. They'll go to the next shell they squat in. Those people, they see 10 guys show up with, hammers, and they're like, look, this is how we feed our families. You got to go. We need to build this house. Most people just leave anyway. They don't want to deal with it. Squatters aren't always that confrontational as you would see on like the news. They're not really trying to do, all of that. So if you see a good property and it has a squatter, make sure you engage an eviction attorney and post some notices on the door once you have the deal under contract. You're the new equitable owner, and try to negotiate. Try to be a person. Like I said, people are dealing with real life stuff, so they might be going through something, and you showing up with 3 grand or 2 grand is like a big deal to them, and they're like, man, this is, yeah, I'll gladly leave. I can be out by next Friday. And then most people leave, like 90% will just leave and take the money because it's a good deal. There's that 10% that can be like pesky, but you don't have to do the deal. You want to design the contract so that you can walk away if it's not closed vacant within 60 days. And you're giving yourself a nice 60-day window to negotiate and get somebody out. So I go after squatter deals all the time. Got some incredible deals, done some cash for keys, and try to treat people respectfully. And some people have gotten paid. And I don't care. I look at it as all a cost of doing business. It's a cost of doing business. If you want to operate in a C class, you're gonna have to deal with some squatters. You're gonna have to deal with some drug dealers, on the block, and have to learn how to navigate that at times and how to deal with that. You're gonna deal with some stuff. It's the cost of doing business. Um, Let me see. We had one question. I'm trying to find it. Let me see here. Okay, we had one question come through. How do you define a deal? Is there a percentage ratio for all of the market? Um, it's a good question. I mean, for me, a deal is something that operates within what I call the developer's spread. So I don't look at it as a percentage. I look at it as a spread. And my ideal spread is $200,000 because on the average property, if you're doing like residential, anything from 2,000 square feet and down, like 3 stories, 2,000 square feet and down, 200,000 is going to get it done. So, and usually maybe a little less than that, like 100K, 130K, you can go in and pretty much full gut renovate most properties that are 2,000 square feet or less with that amount of money. So if I can buy something for 20, 25, 30,000, or let's even say if I could buy something for 100,000 and it had an after repair value of 325,000, that has a nice developer spread on it for me where it's going to be attractive. So I'm always looking for spreads that I can operate in within a construction budget. That's like my go-to versus a percentage type of thing. So that's my answer to that. You always want to, and a lot of this is about understanding value, right? So you have to understand comps intimately to be able to know, yeah, this thing is worth 325 and it just happens to be selling for 100K because it's in a rough condition. If you acquire, another question, if you acquire multiple properties, should you set up LLCs for each property? Um, no. And the reason why is from a tax perspective. So setting up a multiple, having an LLC for each property, it does offer you good protection. So you will be protected in the event that something happens on one of the LLCs. They can't come and sue the other LLCs or try to take all of the property. So there is protection there. You can mitigate a lot of that with insurance, with what we call like blanket liability insurance. So as you have your homeowner's insurance, you can beef that up a little bit and get a blanket liability policy like add on, like a rider, and they'll add maybe another 2 to 5 million of blanket liability coverage. Slip and fall, something happens to somebody, and they try to sue the property owner, that insurance protection will step in and cover you. And that is, that's a big part of what you're doing the LLC thing for if you get sued and somebody's trying to come after you. The problem with doing an LLC per property is when you go to pay your taxes, the tax man is going to put his hand out. And that every LLC you have needs a 1065 filed. And it's a lot more paperwork. Basically, more paperwork means more money going to the tax man in terms of fees. So if you're really scaling this thing, that might be fine at 5 properties, but if you got up to um, 50 properties, you have 50 LLCs, you're gonna have like a $50,000 tax bill. Your tax bill is gonna be obnoxious. And there are, as you get bigger in this game, you have to keep going up to bigger accounting firms that can handle this. So you can't go to H&R Block with 50 properties. Like it's they're gonna be like, bro, we do taxes for like, the guy who drives Uber and that's it, or the guy who works the 9 to 5 and that's it. There's no other like sources of income, or maybe they have like a side rental property. They're not doing sophisticated taxes for developers or investors with numerous properties in multiple states that were purchased at multiple time points that are doing different types of depreciation. They're not doing all that. So you have to go to mid-major um, accounting firms, and then if you get bigger, if you get over 100 properties or 200 properties, you have to go even bigger. And they start working like kind of law firms. They work on a fee-based basis. They charge you by the hour. The more they have to do, the more it costs. Typically you want to put about 5 properties to a LLC. I learned this from a property manager that I was working with in Baltimore that was managing some properties for me, but they were managing like thousands of properties. So I asked this same question. It's like, what should I be doing? 5 to a LLC. If you do anything less than that, your tax bill is going to be crazy. So 5 to a LLC is like that. That's the max. You could do 3 to a LLC, two to three to a LLC. I think 5 to a LLC is where you're getting more aggressive. But if your plan is to have 50 to 100 properties, 5 to a LLC is perfectly fine. And you'd be shocked. Like there aren't many lawsuits that happen from like the tenant's end. I've actually been sued more by like, oh, I was working on this property and then somebody's like, well, my roof started leaking. It's like, well, you probably haven't had your roof done in 10 years, but they want it to be your fault because you were working on the property next door. You'll get little stuff like that more than you'll get issues from your own tenants in terms of like true risk. The biggest risk, I think, as a landlord in America is lead. For some reason, we just kept in America building with lead paint well into the 70s when everybody else in the world kind of stopped in the somewhere between the 20s and the 50s. We just kept doing it until almost the 80s. So a lot of these properties in most of these cities that were built in 1910s, 1915s, the properties, if you go in, the staircase, the window casing, some of that old mold that they just kept painting over, that all has lead in it. And if you don't abate that lead, get it removed from the property, and or get like your lead certificates, which a lot of people don't even know about. They don't know to do. Then if somebody's kid gets lead poisoning, especially under the age of 6 years old, in many states it's unlimited liability. So you could get sued for millions of dollars for that. Um, and that could be disastrous for you. So definitely paying attention to the lead is the best way to protect yourself. Any other questions out there? Feel free to hop off mute, drop something in the chat. See if we have any more here. Monica, you have a question? Yes. Hmm. Okay. Okay. I'm gonna repeat the question. Let me mute you because we got a yeah, we had a echo. So the question was, so we have a property, like if you're the owner and you put this property under a wrap, so you basically, um, wrap the mortgage, and then maybe you're doing some type of rent to own to somebody else, or to on like a triple net lease. So you're not really the land serving as the landlord. Like if the toilet breaks, it's not on you, it's on them because they're the new effective like rent to owner type of situation. Can you? The question is like, can you contract out of a lead issue, like a pre-existing lead issue? And I would say it depends. Um, Really, when you get into this lead stuff, you're dealing with the judge. You're dealing with the court and the judge. So it's America, and to some people, the beautiful thing about America is you can sue anybody for anything. You don't like you can sue anybody for anything you want. Doesn't mean you'll win, and even if you win, it doesn't mean you'll get paid a dime. Doesn't mean you'll collect anything. But you can sue anybody hypothetically for anything. So if somebody gets lead poisoning, or their kid does, which is like the biggest risk factor, you could get sued for it. Now, if you do get sued for it, even if it's contracted out in an agreement, the court could say you can't contract out lead because they don't want it. They might say it's a fundamental right. It should have been disclosed. So the question would be, did you have any testing done to disclose lead? And if you didn't, that could be penalized against you. There's just a lot that can go wrong, and then you're leaving it up to a judge to make a final determination of if they're going to allow that, or if that's something that can be contracted out. Like for instance, I could draft a contract with a Section 8 tenant that says they waive their right to a 15-day pay or quit notice before I can file, an eviction. But there are government agencies that will say, well, you can't, because they're low income, and they make below this median income, they're more likely to be victimized socially. So you can't contract that out for somebody who's on HUD housing. You can't. And it doesn't matter if they signed it or not, because they're not a sophisticated consumers. They're not like an accredited investor or somebody. Like if you have money, they're just like, oh, whatever. But if you don't, you get a lot of protections, free attorneys. So you'd be playing a dangerous game. It's much easier, especially in lead cities. Like Baltimore is the biggest lead city in. Well, I won't say that, but they have a lot of lead, right? There are other cities with lead in the water, So like I won't dump on Baltimore, but they've had some of the bigger lead cases, and they are strict on lead. They don't play when it comes to lead. I really learned how to abate lead, how to deal with lead violations because being an investor in Baltimore, and I appreciate that I was able to learn at that level so early on in the game, because it's like a huge lesson for a renovator. So your best bet is, no matter what, for every property that you are going to rent to anyone in any way, shape, or form, to just have a lead inspector come in, do their testing, and test the property for lead. Now, if they test it for lead, they might say, well, you need to touch up paint, or do what you need to do to pass a swipe test. And a lot of that is just a special way of cleaning the property with certain materials, chemicals. Like there's a way to clean the property, and then they will do basically a test where they go wipe surfaces and X amount of surfaces per floor, and they will submit that to the lab. And then as long as there's not so many parts per million of dust, of lead dust in that sample, then you'll pass. You'll get like a lead cert that says you're clear for 2 years. And that's just a better way to go about it. Even if that cert expired after 2 years, you never renewed it. It's just the fact that you did it before moving somebody in or around about that time, is going to give you a lot more leeway with the judge. And that's really when you start getting into kind of this court game, you just want to be on the judge's good side. You want to look like a upstanding citizen or they're going to bury you. Like it just is what it is. So you want to look like, hey, I did my due diligence. We brought them in. We did this. There was no lead when we moved them in. We passed. Maybe lead became present from wear and tear, and they were living in it. We didn't get to it. It's not going to look as bad. But I recommend staying ahead of lead because getting behind it could lead to $1 million lawsuit, especially with the children. Because the judge doesn't care about us. They're going to look and say, this kid is 6 years old. If you look at the studies of what lead poisoning does to like the brain of a child, it's horrific. It's horrific, and they're little bodies. So even a little bit of lead, like to us, like almost nothing would happen to an adult. Like you would need repeated lead poisoning over a long period of time. You would have to eat a lot of lead or absorb a lot of lead through the skin. For a kid, it's like a little bit on that little body. It's like you give them a gummy worm or something, like they're gonna be bouncing off the walls. A little bit of sugar, a little bit of lead will have an alternate effect. Like it's gonna have a really bad effect. So you want to stay ahead of that stuff and start to learn about it, and just make sure you're ahead of the curve. Um, Even if your city where you're at right now is not very strict on lead, sometimes these things change over the course of time. Even like I went to Baltimore and it was really strict, and I was doing stuff in Philly and it wasn't strict on lead, and then Philly started to adopt Baltimore's code. But by the time Philly did, I already knew it, so I was like, no problem, I didn't care, and I just started renovating my properties to remove all lead, and I know where the lead is. So as you get good at lead, it's like you know where it is. And that's another question here. Uh, so hopefully that answers that question. I would do it anyway. I would get it inspected anyway. No, you're welcome. Yeah, and that's the way to look at it is look at it from the judge's perspective. They're just trying to protect the kids. We're investors, so we don't want to spend money that we don't have to spend. But a lead inspection is only a couple $100. It's not like a crazy thing. It just becomes a part of your process. So rather pay a couple $100 than a couple million. How do you get rid of lead? Is another question. Lead, when you go into a property, lead is always in the same places. So it's in the, like I said, it's in the railing, the banister, that old banister that's got like the caked paint on it. Especially on that property, you watch like Property Brothers and you think you're gonna save it. You think you're like a rehabber and you're gonna come in and save it. I'm gonna save the money. I'm gonna keep the railing. It's got lead in it most of the time. Those baseboards throughout the property that are old, caked over. There's outlets in them. There's probably an old phone jack in it too that nobody uses. It's got lead in it. The windowsills, lead. Um, on the exterior of the property, a lot of the casings, wooden casings and stuff, those have lead in it. Typically, some of the old door casings and door jambs that have never been replaced in these properties, lead. So you start to understand where the lead is. So then any property, you start to demo all of this stuff out, which is why I believe it's another reason why I believe so heavily in full gut renovation, because it's like I got to get the lead out of this thing. So you come in and that's the first thing you see. You're like, rip out all the baseboards, rip them out, new baseboards throughout, new window trim, new door jambs, door casings. You can also do things sometimes in your stairs, your risers, and your stair treads. They'll have lead. So you start to come in when you're trying to get rid of lead. You can either completely demo it out, which is what we were just talking about, or you can permanently encase and seal this lead, and that's where you take different products that are like permanent. So like if there was lead in the basement wall, I could just put masonry over it, and that's a permanent solution to just enclose it. Or if there was lead in the bricks on the exterior, I could put up siding, and that's a permanent encasing it. So there's different ways to go about abating lead and renovating it, especially before the city gets involved. Once the city gets involved, um, then you're in a true abatement process, which is very meticulous, and you have to be careful with lead when you're renovating. Especially here's another thing that'll happen. So you buy this rental property, and you're like, hey, I'm not. It looks decent enough. I'm just gonna paint it and put somebody in it. Like I'm not gonna renovate it. So you do that. Then the tenant asks you, hey, can you come over and put up some blinds? I want to add some blinds here. I want to do X, Y, Z. So you send your handyman over. What's he do? He just pulls out his drill, bangs right into the window casing, it drills through, sawdust flying everywhere, just blowing all through the room. That's lead dust because it's going straight through those old window jambs and casings, and it's this lead dust just blowing into the kid's bedroom. It's all over the sheets. It's all over the floor. The kid's gonna be eating some potato chips, drop it on the floor. There's lead in the potato chip. Then they're gonna eat it. They're gonna go to school. They're gonna get a blood test, or go to the doctor, get a checkup, and their blood work's gonna come back bad, and they're gonna blame you. They're not even gonna blame the school. They're gonna blame you. The school's gonna say no lead here. Here's our paperwork, and if you don't have none, it's you. So these things just happen. These things happen. So it's better to get that paperwork. But there are many ways to get lead out. You just go through an abatement process or um, just a general process. What I just talked about here, and you'll get 90% of the lead. And then when you get your lead inspection done, your inspector will tell you, if there's still lead. They have like special like kind of X-ray vision guns, we'll call them, for lack of a better um, analogy, and they can detect lead within substances. So they can go and just scan, your walls or your baseboards or your door trim or your bricks or whatever, and tell you, no, there's still lead in here. You need to permanently enclose, encase this, or demo it, get it out of here, and then we can give you, different degrees of lead certificates: lead free, limited lead free, lead safe. There's different levels to this lead game. Bumping up on an hour. What other questions do we have out there? You guys know when we're bumping up on an hour, I'll keep going or I'll shut us down. Um, should I create an LLC in the state of the property, or is out of state better for tax purposes and protection? You're not really. You should create an LLC in the state that offers you the best protection and fees. So people like Wyoming and Delaware, because they're really good on protection. From a protection standpoint, you're looking at piercing. Can they see who formed the LLC? Who are the members and managers of the LLC? And in a place like Delaware or Wyoming, it's like nearly impossible. I don't even think you need to disclose who you are as the former of an LLC. So it's like you have no idea who owns the LLC, and if they don't know you own it, then how could they sue you for it, right? So it's very difficult in those states, which is why people will set up a Delaware LLC. Then you would file a non-resident license, for the LLC to operate within the state that holds the property. It's called a foreign registration. So you would want to file this so that you have the right to operate with commercially, we'll call it, collecting rents and operating as a business within a state. And that's basically just the state taxing you, saying you're making money in our state. You got to pay this annual registration fee, foreign registration fee. So create the LLC in a place that offers you the best protection and then the lowest fees. So places like Delaware, the annual filing fee, the annual renewal fee can be lower than certain states. And this is, I would say, real estate specific, because there are other businesses like the lending business where you may have to open your parent company in the state where you're domiciled. Like you have to. So, and then you don't want to be in certain states because the regulations, there's like different blue sky laws. And I mean, we could do a masterclass just on that alone. It'd probably be very boring, but that's the answer. Open the LLC in like Delaware or Wyoming typically, and then do a foreign registration in the city, municipality, state that you want to operate in, and That's the best way to go about it. That is the best way to go about it. I like Delaware. I've seen Wyoming. Um, I've just never done Wyoming. Delaware's been fine. I didn't really see a need to change. I hear good things about Wyoming, but I like Delaware. They have a good. Delaware has a good court system as well. If you get into disputes, disputes, partnership disputes, Delaware can be really good. So I like Delaware. Um, I like Delaware. I don't have any issues with Delaware. But go, research Wyoming. Everybody do your own independent research. Talk to attorneys. If you have family attorneys, they may have alternate opinions. But I think either state, you're not really going to go wrong in that sense. Any other questions out there? Anything at all? Have I ever? Is the question is have I ever purchased a property from somebody through like a land trust and then had them be the trustee? I'm not sure what the question is. I haven't done that particular strategy. No, I haven't done that particular strategy. Any other questions out there? Oh, mm-hmm. Okay. How can we work around a loan where the lender is asking for us to show income, like a minimum of 50,000, and we're currently not working? It's it can be it's not that you have to be working actively, but you do need some streams, right? The lender's job in underwriting you is to make sure that you can like afford the product even if the tenant stop paying. So one way to get around it, if you weren't working and they wanted to see income, is to show massive amounts, not massive amounts, but just show enough liquidity to cover, a shortfall. So if tenants stop paying, let's say you had $150,000 of cash and a mortgage payment is like 1,200 a month, then you would just argue with them like, look, I'm not working now. I'm building this cash flow. I'm in between jobs, but I have enough to cover 3 years mortgage payments if the tenant stop paying. Um, I'm fine to leave some money in escrow, or you can kind of work your way through that. But they're typically going to want to see some type of cash stream. So the scenario where you wouldn't need to be working is if you already had properties that were kicking off cash flow, then the lender would just look at you and say, well, I mean, they have cash flow, they have other assets. There's other sources of liquidity in case things go wrong. This person, clearly they're not working, they're building the real estate full time. So it's not like the lender always needs you working. You can transition and be doing real estate full time and still, qualify for loans, and they'll just look at you as a professional with a lot of assets. But you early on, if you don't have a ton of assets, you're going to want to show some form of liquidity that will make a lender comfortable, because they just don't want the deals to not perform or to kind of fall apart. So Yeah. No, I mean, the question was, lenders are constantly asking for like underwriting. So when a lender is underwriting, they're asking you questions like, have you done any deals before? How many flips have you done? How many? What they're trying to do is just gain a general sense of comfort from you. And I talk about this in sections of the course, really in the mindset sections, where this game is about how you pitch yourself to lenders, how you present yourself a lot of the time is very important. So just showing up to the table, presenting yourself, in a strong manner, and having your spiel down. Like, this is what I'm doing. I'm working with a group that's done tons of rehabs. Um, this deal is right up their alley. You have to have the right spiel when you approach the lender to get through underwriting requirements, because a lot of these lenders are just making up underwriting requirements as they go. They don't really have them. They're like, oh well, I want to see this contract from the contractor saying exactly what the deal will cost, and they might ask you for that, and the next guy they don't ask for it because he sounds more confident. They're just people, um, especially hard money lenders, construction lenders. They're just private investors, really. They put on a good face and like, hey, this is a serious shop. This is how we do things here. They're really just a couple of people in a boardroom at the end of the day. Most of these shops have like 10 people working there. So it's all about the presentation. And that you I've experienced it. So I've shown up to the table and had, lenders make exceptions and do different things just based upon presentation and the way you ask questions. I've had contractors show up to the table and offer different concessions and different things just because of presentation. So over the course of time, you start to learn that 90% of it is presentation. So that call and those early presentations are important. If they start asking these questions and they're not getting back a sense of confidence, they start asking for more and more and more, because they're trying to figure out. Like I say all the time, lenders hate new clients. They just hate new people. They want to deal with existing relationships, and because new relationships, there's almost no real way to underwrite it properly. They're at the end of the day hoping that you perform, and then if you don't, then they just kind of lose money. Because the sad part about lenders is they don't know anything about real estate. It's kind of shocking, but you would assume that these lenders know stuff about real estate, and they don't. They don't really know what construction costs. They don't really know what the deal is worth. They send out an appraiser to tell them what the deal is worth. They deal with people like me, because I know what the construction cost is. They don't know. So they're literally trying to underwrite you because that's all they can underwrite. If they knew what the deal was worth and what the actual construction costs were, they wouldn't even be nervous about most of these deals. They wouldn't even care. They just be like, well, if they can't do it, we'll just step in and do it and make money. But they can't do that because they don't know what they're doing. And that's the shocking part about really the entire investment sphere, is that most people don't know anything. And the real person you're relying on in your 401k with this real estate is me. Like, a lot of people, these Section 8 properties are in their 401k, and they're relying on my ability to execute, not the lenders, not the underwriters, truly my ability, boots on the ground, to execute and keep these properties cash flowing. So, no, no, the government takes your money. The Uncle Sam's there with his hand out. I'm your partner when you make money. If you lose money, that's on you. But I gave you bankruptcy. Good luck. No, I mean, you could use your husband's income. That's definitely fine. And then here's the thing, do what you got to do to execute on the first deal. Once you execute on the first deal, all these imaginary guidelines and risk profiles, it all goes away. It's all garbage. And then you're like, wait, you don't need those 10 things you asked for last time? No, that was all garbage. That was just because you were new. And you're like, oh, okay. It's all just because you knew. So yeah, if you want to leverage, your husband's income now and then get a deal done, and then after that, they'll just deal with you. Like they really won't care. Yep, you're welcome. Most likely, yeah. If you're leveraging your husband's income, your brother, your sister's income, they might need to become a guarantor on the loan. Most likely, unless you can show enough liquidity, unless there's like a joint account with a ton of capital. That's what the lender's going to care about is liquidity. It's all a negotiation, so it's really just about um, presenting solutions and options. Negotiation would be, well, we'll escrow 6 months of interest, and you might not care because you're gonna rehab this project in 3 months and then sell it, and that money that's escrowed is going to come back to you if it doesn't get eaten away in fees. So there's different ways to skin the cat, but a lot of it is just presentation. Like that would be the difference. Like how can I explain it cleaner? If I had the same financial conditions as anybody on this call, whether it be credit, liquidity, capital, whatever, and we both call a lender, I'm 90x, have a 90 times more higher chance of being successful in getting that loan than you, just based on how I talk. Not based on me pulling up, HUDs and all these past deals that they'll say, oh, how do I know you've done deals? Let me talk to your underwriter. I'll talk circles around him because he doesn't know anything. How do I know you can execute on a deal? Well, I know the cost of construction. I know how long everything takes. So what do you want to talk about? I mean, I could do this deal in my sleep. And I'm gonna talk to him just like that. And he's gonna know. I mean, it might help that he maybe Googles me and he'll probably watch some YouTube videos or something. And be like, oh, he gets a little education from it or something like that. But even outside of that, the phone call alone, he's gonna understand. They say like a real will recognize real. I'm gonna sound like his bigger clients. I'm gonna sound like it. And he's gonna be like, this guy knows his stuff. I think if we don't do this deal, we could lose it. We could actually lose this guy. We could lose this guy, and maybe he's gonna go out and do 10 deals with somebody else, and that puts them in a worse position. So a lot of it is presentation. A lot of it is bravado, we'll call it, or just how you carry yourself and how you can talk about this. Which is why I say, learning the game, spending time, going through course content and really understanding this game intimately. This is what makes you successful. Even if you're back to that wholesale question, even if you're wholesaling, it's not just is wholesaling better than burr strategy. It's can you get to the level of wholesaling where you can really educate somebody on a creative financing deal, somebody who knows nothing about real estate? Do you know that intimately? Because if you don't, then you're not going to be successful. So you have to really get deep into the knowledge, because that is where you get your concessions and start to make your millions. Is when you master the knowledge. It's not necessarily the experience or having the liquidity. You could have all of those things and they still won't do the deal because you don't sound right to them. It's like little stuff like that.